The year was 2654, and humanity had finally clawed its way into the interstellar stage. After centuries of squabbling over borders and resources on Earth, humans had ventured beyond their home planet to forge alliances with alien species scattered across the galaxy. It wasn't easy. Many races viewed humanity as reckless newcomers, but Captain Elias Drake had earned a reputation as one of the few who could navigate both diplomacy and danger. Elias sat in the cockpit of his sleek fighter ship, the Starblade, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. He was on what should have been a routine reconnaissance mission near the edge of Siren space. The Xerens were a proud and warlike race known for their towering stature, razor-sharp claws, and an unyielding devotion to tradition. They weren't exactly friendly neighbors, but they weren't outright hostile either. At least not to those who respected their rules. "Command, this is Drake," Elias said into the comm system. His voice carried a calm authority that came from years of service. "Patrol route Delta 7 complete. No anomalies detected." There was a brief pause before the reply crackled through the speakers. "Copy that, Captain. Maintain position for another hour, then return to base." Elias sighed and leaned back in his seat. Space missions often involved long stretches of boredom punctuated by moments of chaos. This was shaping up to be one of the boring ones. Or so he thought. Just as he was about to run another systems check, a blip appeared on his radar, a faint signal drifting through the void. At first, he dismissed it as asteroid debris or some stray piece of space junk. But then the signal grew stronger, accompanied by a low-frequency hum that sent shivers down his spine. Curiosity piqued. Elias adjusted his course to investigate. As he approached, the source of the signal became clear: a massive cruiser, its sleek design unmistakably Xeran. The vessel was heavily damaged, chunks of its hull missing like jagged wounds. Smoke billowed from ruptured engines, and sparks danced across exposed circuits. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been pretty. Elias frowned. Normally, Chirans didn't need help. They prided themselves on being self-reliant warriors. If they were in trouble, it meant something serious had gone down. Still, protocol dictated that he assess the situation before deciding whether to intervene. Unidentified Siren cruiser, this is Captain Elias Drake of the United Earth Fleet. He transmitted cautiously. "Do you require assistance?" Static greeted him at first, followed by a weak, distorted voice. "This, King Vorac, requesting aid." Elias's eyes widened. King Vorac, the ruler of the entire Xiren Empire. What was he doing out here alone? And why did he sound so desperate? Without hesitation, Elias activated his ship's defenses and moved closer. As he scanned the cruiser, he noticed multiple bogies closing in fast, smaller ships armed to the teeth. Pirates. Marauders. Whoever they weren't there to offer a handshake. "Stand by, Your Majesty," Elias said firmly. "I'm coming in." What followed was nothing short of chaos. The Marauders opened fire without warning, their weapons tearing through the already damaged cruiser. Elias maneuvered the Starblade with practiced precision, dodging incoming blasts while returning fire with surgical accuracy. His heart pounded as he weaved between explosions, each second feeling like an eternity. Inside the Siren cruiser, King Vorac fought to stay conscious. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, and his regal armor was scorched and dented. He had never imagined he'd owe his life to a human, a species he barely tolerated, but desperation left him no choice. When Elias's voice came through the comms, promising help, Vorac allowed himself a flicker of hope. Back outside, Elias unleashed everything the Starblade had to offer. Missiles streaked through the blackness, striking true against the Marauders' weaker ships. One by one, the attackers fell back, unwilling to risk further losses against such a skilled opponent. Within minutes, the battlefield fell silent, leaving only the wreckage of the skirmish behind. Breathing heavily, Elias guided his ship toward the crippled cruiser. "Your Majesty, are you still with me?" "I am," came the strained reply. "You have my thanks, human. Few would dare face such odds for someone like me." Elias chuckled dryly. "Let's just say I've got a soft spot for underdogs." After securing the area, Elias docked with the Siren cruiser and made his way inside. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burnt metal. Navigating the corridors carefully, he eventually found the king slumped in a command chair, clutching the ceremonial blade as if preparing for a final stand. "You look like you've seen better days," Elias remarked, trying to lighten the mood. Vorac managed a weak grin despite his injuries. "And you look like someone who enjoys picking fights. Tell me, human, why did you risk your life for mine?" Elias shrugged. "Call it professional courtesy. Besides, if I let anything happen to you, my bosses would probably throw me out an airlock." The king chuckled softly, though pain flickered across his face. "A debt like this cannot go unpaid. Among my people, gratitude is sacred. You will be rewarded." Elias waved off the comment. "Don't worry about it. Just doing my job." But deep down, he knew things wouldn't end there. The Xerans took honor seriously, and saving the life of their king wasn't something they'd easily forget. Little did Elias realize, this moment would change his life forever, and thrust him into a situation far more complicated than any battle. For now, though, all he wanted was to get the king to safety. As they prepared to leave the ruined cruiser behind, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stepped onto a path with no turning back. The journey back to the Siren capital was tense but uneventful. King Vorac, despite his injuries, insisted on returning to his palace immediately. His pride wouldn't allow him to linger in a human ship for longer than necessary. Elias, however, couldn't help but notice the king's demeanor shift as they approached their destination. What had started as quiet gratitude morphed into something more contemplative, and perhaps even troubled. As the Starblade descended through the planet's thick atmosphere, Elias caught his first glimpse of the Tyran homeworld. It was a harsh, unforgiving place. Endless deserts of crimson sand stretching beneath a blood-red sky. Jagged mountains rose like broken teeth, and the air shimmered with heat waves that made everything seem surreal. At the heart of it all stood the royal palace, an imposing fortress carved from black stone, its spires reaching toward the heavens. Elias landed the ship in a designated docking bay, where a squadron of armored guards awaited them. Their golden armor gleamed under the artificial lights, and their clawed hands rested on weapons designed to intimidate. They didn't speak as they escorted the king and his unlikely savior into the palace, but their piercing gazes said enough. Inside, the opulence of the royal court was staggering. Massive halls lined with intricate carvings depicted scenes of Tyran conquests, while towering statues loomed over visitors like silent sentinels. Everything about the place screamed power and tradition, a stark contrast to the simplicity Elias had grown accustomed to on Earth. King Vorac led Elias to a grand chamber filled with advisors, nobles, and other high-ranking officials. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as they entered, eyes wide with disbelief at the sight of a human walking among them. For a moment, Elias felt like an outsider intruding on sacred ground, but then he remembered what he'd done. He straightened his posture and met their stares head-on. Silence. Vorac bellowed, his deep voice echoing off the walls. The room fell quiet instantly. "This human saved my life when no one else could. Without him, I would not stand before you today." A murmur of surprise swept through the assembly. Saving the life of a Siren king was no small feat, and many seemed genuinely impressed, even if they were reluctant to admit it. But just as quickly as the murmurs began, they died down again when Vorac raised a hand. "Among our people," he continued, "gratitude is sacred. A debt must be repaid, not with words, but with action. Therefore, I have decided." He paused dramatically, letting the anticipation build, to gift Captain Elias Drake with something of immense value. Elias tensed. Something of immense value. What did that mean? Before he could ask, A side door opened, and a figure stepped into the chamber. She was unlike any siren Ilias had seen so far. While most of her kind were stoic and rigid, this young woman radiated defiance. Her sharp features were framed by long, silvery hair that cascaded down her back, and her piercing green eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. She wore ceremonial robes adorned with intricate patterns, but they looked more like a prison uniform than regal attire based on the scowl she wore. "This is my daughter, Princess Zenara," Vorac announced, gesturing toward her. "She will accompany you back to your world as a token of my gratitude." The room erupted into gasps and whispers. Even Ilias struggled to process what he'd just heard. A princess. As a gift? This wasn't part of the plan. Zenara crossed her arms, glaring daggers at her father. "You can't do this," she snapped, her voice laced with anger. "I am not some trinket to be handed out as payment." Vorac's expression hardened. "You are my daughter, and you will obey me. Your constant rebellion has brought shame upon this family. Perhaps time among humans will teach you humility." Elias cleared his throat, stepping forward cautiously. "Your Majesty, I appreciate the gesture, but this isn't necessary." "Really? There's no need." "It is decided," Vorac interrupted, cutting him off. "You leave within the hour. Prepare yourself, Captain Drake, and prepare her." With that, he turned and strode out of the chamber, leaving Elias and Zenara alone amidst the stunned crowd. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Zenara let out an exasperated sigh and threw up her hands. Unbelievable. Of all the ridiculous things he could have done. Elias rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Look, I didn't ask for this. Trust me, I'm just as confused as you are." "Oh, spare me your excuses," she shot back, though her tone softened slightly. "You're just another pawn in his game, same as me." Despite her hostility, Ilias couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. Being treated like property clearly wasn't sitting well with her, and honestly, he couldn't blame her. Still, arguing with her wasn't going to solve anything. If anything, it would only make the situation worse. "Listen," he said gently, "I don't know what your father's thinking, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make this manageable. You're not a prisoner, okay? We'll figure something out." Zenara studied him for a moment, searching his face for signs of deception. Finally, she nodded curtly. "Fine, but don't think for a second that I'll play along with whatever nonsense you or my father have planned." With that, she turned and stormed out of the chamber, leaving Elias standing there feeling like he'd just been thrust into the middle of a galactic soap opera. Back on the Starblade, preparations were underway for departure. Elias tried to focus on the logistics of the trip, but his mind kept drifting back to Zenara. She was fiery, intelligent, and clearly frustrated with her circumstances. But there was also a vulnerability beneath her tough exterior. He wondered what kind of life she'd lived under her father's strict rule and how much freedom she truly had. When Zenara finally boarded the ship, she carried herself with the same defiant air she displayed in the palace. She refused to acknowledge Elias at first, instead pacing around the cabin and inspecting every detail of the vessel. Eventually, curiosity got the better of her. "So this is how humans travel?" she asked, running a clawed finger along the smooth surface of the control panel. "It's smaller than I expected." Elias chuckled. "Yeah, well, we're not exactly known for building palaces in space. Besides, bigger isn't always better." Zenara raised an eyebrow, spoken like someone who's never lived in one. "Touché," Elias thought. Out loud, he said, "Fair point. But trust me, living in tight quarters has its advantages. Less room for drama, for starters." She smirked faintly, and for a brief moment, the tension between them eased. It was a small victory, but Elias took it as a sign that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this bizarre arrangement. As the engines roared to life and the Starblade lifted off, Elias glanced over at Zenara, who was now gazing out the viewport at the shrinking planet below. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain: This was going to be a journey neither of them would forget anytime soon. The first few hours aboard the Starblade were anything but smooth. Zinara spent most of her time pacing back and forth, muttering under her breath in a language Elias didn't understand. Her sharp claws clicked against the metal floor with every step, creating an uneven rhythm that grated on his nerves. She occasionally shot him annoyed glances, as if blaming him for her predicament, even though he'd made it clear he hadn't asked for this. Elias tried to focus on flying the ship, but Zinara's restless energy made it hard to concentrate. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he decided to break the ice. "You know," he said casually, keeping his eyes on the controls. "You're free to sit down. I promise the ship won't bite." Zinara stopped mid-step and turned to face him. "I'm not here because I want to be," she snapped. "And I certainly don't plan to get comfortable." "Suit yourself," Elias replied with a shrug. "But you might as well make the best of it. We've got a long trip ahead of us." She crossed her arms and leaned against the wall, narrowing her glowing green eyes at him. "You humans are strange creatures. You act like everything is negotiable, as if rules and traditions mean nothing." Elias raised an eyebrow. "And your people aren't?" "From what I've seen, you Xarans live by rigid codes. Seems pretty suffocating, if you ask me." "That's because we value order," Zinara shot back. "Without structure, society falls apart. Humans seem to thrive on chaos." He chuckled softly. "Not all of us. Some of us just prefer flexibility over rigidity. Besides, isn't rebellion kind of chaotic? Or does that only apply when it suits you?" Her expression faltered for a moment, caught off guard by his observation. After a pause, she sighed and slid into the co-pilot's seat, though she still kept her distance. "Fine. Maybe you're not entirely wrong. But my father doesn't see it that way. To him, I'm either obedient or worthless." Elias glanced at her, noting the bitterness in her tone. "Sounds like he cares more about appearances than happiness." "He cares about power," Zinara corrected. "Everything he does is to maintain control over me, over our people, over everything. He thinks sending me away will fix me, but all it's doing is proving how little he understands me." There was a vulnerability in her voice that Elias hadn't expected. For all her bravado, she clearly carried a heavy burden. He hesitated before speaking again, choosing his words carefully. "I may not know much about being royalty," he admitted, "but I do know what it's like to feel trapped. Sometimes, doing the right thing means breaking the rules, even if it pisses off the people in charge." Zinara tilted her head, studying him curiously. "Is that why you saved my father? Because you thought it was the right thing to do?" Elias nodded. "Yeah. It wasn't about politics or alliances. It was about helping someone in need. Call me old-fashioned, but I believe in giving people a chance, even if they don't deserve it." For the first time since they'd met, Zinara smiled, a small, genuine smile that softened her features. Maybe humans aren't completely hopeless after all. As the days passed, the tension between them began to ease. Zinara started asking questions about Earth, its culture, and how humans managed to survive without the strict hierarchy she was used to. Elias answered patiently, sharing stories of humanity's struggles and triumphs. In return, she opened up about her own world, describing the beauty of Tyran landscapes and the complexities of their caste system. One evening, as they floated through a particularly stunning nebula, Zinara stood beside Elias in the cockpit, gazing out at the swirling colors of purple and gold. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Almost peaceful." "It is," Elias agreed. "Out here, you realize how small we all are. All the fighting, the politics. It feels kind of pointless when you're staring at something like this." Zinara nodded slowly. "Back home, we're taught to conquer, to dominate. But maybe there's another way." Her words lingered in the air, unspoken possibilities hanging between them. For the first time, Elias allowed himself to imagine what it might be like to work alongside someone like Zinara, not as a reluctant passenger, but as a partner. There was fire in her, a determination to challenge the status quo that reminded him of his younger self. But their fragile peace was shattered when disaster struck. An alarm blared suddenly, jolting both of them out of their reverie. Elias scanned the monitors, his heart sinking as he spotted the problem. "We've got company," he said grimly. A group of ships had appeared on the radar. Small, fast-moving vessels bearing markings Elias recognized instantly. They belonged to a faction of rogue Exurans who opposed King Vorac's rule. "They must have tracked us," Zinara muttered, her claws digging into the armrest of her seat. "This isn't good." "Understatement of the century," Elias replied, gripping the controls tightly. "Hold on. We're going dark." He activated the ship's cloaking device, masking their presence from the enemy fleet. The rogues circled cautiously, searching for signs of life. For several tense minutes, neither of them dared to breathe. Then, without warning, one of the ships fired a probing blast directly at the starblade. The impact shook the vessel violently, throwing Zinara to the floor. "They found us," she shouted, scrambling to her feet. "No kidding." Elias yelled back, his focus razor-sharp as he maneuvered the ship into evasive action. Lasers streaked past them, narrowly missing the hull. "We can't outrun them. They are too fast." Zinara's mind raced. "We need to disable their leader's ship. If we take out their command, the rest will scatter." "How do you suggest we do that?" Elias asked, dodging another volley of fire. "There's a weak point near the engine core," she explained quickly. "A precise shot could cripple it." Elias hesitated for a split second before nodding. "All right, cover me." Working together, they executed a daring plan. While Elias flew the ship in unpredictable patterns to throw off their pursuers, Zinara manned the secondary weapons console, firing bursts of plasma at strategic points. Their coordination was seamless, each anticipating the other's moves as if they'd trained together for years. Finally, with one perfectly aimed shot, Zinara hit the target. The lead ship exploded in a brilliant flash, sending shockwaves through the rogue fleet. Panicked, the remaining ships retreated, vanishing into the void. Exhausted but victorious, Elias slumped back in his seat. "Well, that was fun." Zinara laughed despite herself, collapsing into the co-pilot's chair. "Remind me never to doubt you again." As they sat there catching their breath, Elias couldn't help but feel a newfound respect for the princess. She wasn't just a rebellious royal. She was smart, resourceful, and brave. And for the first time, he realized that maybe this unexpected journey wouldn't be so bad after all. Neither of them spoke, but the bond forming between them was undeniable. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The arrival on Earth was nothing short of overwhelming for Zinara. As the Starblade descended through the planet's atmosphere, she pressed her face against the viewport, her glowing green eyes wide with wonder. Below them stretched vast cities teeming with life, skyscrapers piercing the clouds, rivers of vehicles flowing like veins, and sprawling parks dotted with tiny figures moving about their daily lives. The air was thick with activity, a stark contrast to the rigid order of her homeworld. "This is your planet?" she asked, turning to Elias. Her tone carried a mix of awe and disbelief. "It sure is," he replied with a grin. "Welcome to Earth." Zinara frowned slightly as they landed at a bustling spaceport near New Chicago. The moment the ship's hatch opened, a wave of noise hit her, voices shouting, machines whirring, and the hum of countless engines. Humans bustled around, some glancing curiously at the Tyran princess, but quickly returning to their tasks. To them, seeing an alien wasn't unusual anymore. Interstellar travel had normalized such encounters. But for Zinara, this chaotic energy was completely foreign. Elias guided her through the crowd, his hand lightly resting on her arm to steer her clear of obstacles. "Stay close," he warned. "This place can get crowded." "I've noticed," she muttered dryly, her sharp gaze darting between the people and the towering structures around them. Everything felt so alive. Back home, The Exirans valued silence and discipline, but here, chaos seemed to reign supreme. Their first stop was a government facility where Elias was scheduled to debrief officials about their mission. Zenara bristled at the idea of being paraded in front of human leaders, but Elias assured her it was just protocol. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being treated more like a trophy than a person. Inside the facility, they were ushered into a conference room filled with stern-faced bureaucrats. At the head of the table sat Director Lyanna Hart, a no-nonsense woman with sharp features and an even sharper intellect. She wasted no time getting down to business. "Captain Drake," she began, her voice clipped and professional. "Your report indicates you saved King Vorac's life and brought back his daughter as a diplomatic gesture. Correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Elias replied, standing at attention. "Though I want to clarify, I didn't ask for Princess Zenara as a reward. This was King Vorac's decision." Lyanna nodded, though her expression remained unreadable. "Understood. However, we must consider the implications of having an Exiran royal under our care. She could be invaluable in strengthening ties with the Tyran Empire, or a liability if mishandled." Zenara stiffened beside Elias, her claws flexing involuntarily. "I'm not a pawn in your political games," she snapped, stepping forward. "If you think I'll sit quietly while you use me to manipulate my father, you're mistaken." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Lyanna raised an eyebrow, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged so directly. After a pause, she leaned back in her chair and regarded Zenara thoughtfully. "You misunderstand, Your Highness," she said calmly. "We have no intention of using you against your will. However, your presence here presents opportunities, both for humanity and for you. Perhaps there's something you'd like to gain from this arrangement." Zenara hesitated, caught off guard by the question. She hadn't expected anyone to consider her perspective. Slowly, she straightened her posture, meeting Lyanna's gaze with newfound determination. "I want freedom," she said firmly. "Freedom to choose my own path without being bound by tradition or expectation. If you truly wish to build bridges with my people, start by respecting me as an individual, not as a symbol." The room was quiet for a moment before Lyanna nodded slowly. "A fair request. We'll do our best to honor it." After the meeting, Elias took Zenara to explore the city. He wanted to show her that Earth wasn't just politics and bureaucracy. It was also full of creativity, diversity, and hope. They wandered through bustling markets, vibrant art districts, and serene gardens, each stop revealing a different facet of human society. At one point, they stumbled upon a protest rally. A group of activists stood on a makeshift stage, holding signs and chanting slogans about equality and justice. Zenara watched intently, fascinated by their passion. "They're fighting for change," Elias explained. "Not everyone agrees with them, but they believe in what they're doing, and they're willing to stand up for it." Zenara felt a pang of recognition. These humans reminded her of herself, their courage, their defiance, their refusal to accept the status quo. For the first time since leaving Xiron, she felt a spark of inspiration. But not everyone shared Elias's open-mindedness. Later that evening, as they walked through a quieter part of the city, they encountered a group of teenagers who sneered at Zenara's appearance. "Look, it's one of those lizard frakes," one of them jeered, pointing at her claws. "What's she doing here? Shouldn't she be back on her dusty rock?" Zenara's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, Elias stepped in front of her. "Watch your mouth," he said sharply. "She's a guest here, same as you." The teens laughed and walked away, but the encounter left a bitter taste in both their mouths. Zenara sighed heavily as they continued walking. Is this what it means to be human? Hatred disguised as humor. Elias shook his head. "No, those kids are ignorant, but they don't speak for everyone. Humanity's messy. We make mistakes, but we also learn from them. You'll see." Back at Elias's apartment, a modest but cozy space high above the city, Zenera reflected on everything she'd experienced that day. Earth was unlike anything she'd imagined. Chaotic, unpredictable, and beautiful in its imperfection. And despite the challenges, she found herself drawn to its spirit. As she gazed out the window at the glittering skyline, Ilias joined her, leaning against the frame. "Still think we're hopeless?" Zenera smirked faintly. "Maybe not entirely." For a moment, they stood in companionable silence, two beings from vastly different worlds finding common ground in the stars above. Whatever lay ahead, Zenera knew one thing for certain. Her journey was only beginning. The fragile peace between humans and Hyrens was shattered without warning. It began with a single transmission, a garbled message intercepted by Earth's communication arrays. At first, it seemed like routine chatter from deep space, but when decoded, its contents sent shockwaves through the United Earth fleet. "They're coming," Ilias muttered under his breath as he read the report. The message originated from a radical faction of Hyrens known as the Krylos, a splinter group that opposed King Vorac's rule and viewed humanity as a threat to their empire. According to the transmission, they were mobilizing forces for an attack on Earth itself. Zenera stood beside him, her expression grim. "This is bad," she said softly. "The Krylos don't care about diplomacy or honor. If they think your planet is weak, they'll strike without hesitation." Ilias clenched his fists. "We can't let them get away with this. Not after everything we've done to keep the peace." Before they could formulate a plan, chaos erupted across the globe. Dozens of cities came under fire as Krylos warships descended from orbit, unleashing devastating barrages of energy weapons. Panic spread like wildfire as civilians scrambled for shelter. Governments scrambled to respond, but the sheer scale of the assault overwhelmed their defenses. Amidst the confusion, Zenera became a target. The Krylos viewed her presence on Earth as an act of betrayal, a princess consorting with the enemy, and saw her capture as a way to destabilize both sides. In the dead of night, a team of elite Krylos operatives infiltrated Ilias's apartment, intent on taking her by force. Ilias woke to the sound of shattering glass. His instincts kicked in immediately, grabbing a nearby weapon and shouting, "Zenera, move." She was already awake, her glowing green eyes blazing with determination. Together, they fought back against the intruders, using every advantage their cramped quarters afforded them. Zenera's combat skills proved invaluable. Her claws clashed through armor, while her agility allowed her to evade attacks with ease. Ilias covered her, firing bursts of plasma at the invaders until the room was littered with fallen bodies. But reinforcements kept coming. Outnumbered and outgunned, they knew they couldn't hold out forever. Just as things looked hopeless, backup arrived in the form of Earth's Special Forces unit, elite soldiers trained to handle extraterrestrial threats. They stormed the building, driving the Krylos operatives into retreat. Breathing heavily, Ilias turned to Zenera, who leaned against the wall, blood trickling from a shallow wound on her arm. "You okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "I'll live," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "But we can't stay here. They won't stop until they have me." Back at a secure military base, tensions ran high. Director Lyanna Hart convened an emergency meeting to assess the situation. The mood in the room was somber, the weight of impending disaster pressing down on everyone present. "The Krylos are using Princess Zenera as leverage," Lyanna explained. "If they capture her, they'll use her to rally support against us, and possibly even overthrow King Vorac. What do you suggest we do?" Ilias demanded. "Hand her over." "That's not happening." "No one's handing anyone over," Lyanna snapped, though her tone softened slightly. "But we need to address the root of the problem. The Krylos won't stop unless we take out their leadership." Zenera stepped forward, her sharp features set in determination. "I know where their stronghold is," she announced. "It's hidden in the asteroid belt near Xiron's order. If we hit them there, we can cripple their operations." Elias stared at her, stunned. Are you sure about this? It's dangerous. I didn't ask for your permission, she shot back, though her tone wasn't harsh. This is my fight too. I'm tired of running and hiding. Let's end this. After much debate, the decision was made. A small strike team would accompany Zanara and Elias to the Krylo stronghold, aiming to dismantle their command center and capture key leaders. Time was critical. The longer they waited, the more damage the Krylos could inflict. The journey to the asteroid belt was fraught with tension. As the Starblade approached the designated coordinates, the crew prepared for what lay ahead. Zanara spent hours poring over schematics of the Krylos base, memorizing every detail. Her focus was unwavering, but Elias noticed the faint tremor in her hands, a sign of nerves beneath her confident exterior. You don't have to do this alone, he told her quietly one evening as they sat in the cockpit, staring out at the endless void. Whatever happens, I've got your back. For a moment, she hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. Their bond had grown stronger during their time together, forged in moments of crisis and shared defiance. Neither of them voiced it, but the connection between them was undeniable. When they reached the stronghold, the assault began. The team launched a daring raid, infiltrating the base under cover of darkness. Zanara led the charge, her knowledge of siren architecture guiding them through labyrinthine corridors filled with traps and patrols. Elias stayed close, covering her with precise shots that took down enemies before they could react. Finally, they reached the command center, a cavernous chamber dominated by a massive holographic map displaying the Krylos fleet's movements. At the center stood Commander Drexar, the ruthless leader of the faction. He sneered as Zanara entered, flanked by Elias and the strike team. So, the traitorous princess returns, Drexar growled, drawing his weapon. Did you really think you could stop us? I didn't come to negotiate, Zanara replied, her voice steady despite the danger. I came to finish this. What followed was a fierce firefight, with both sides exchanging blows in a desperate bid for victory. Zanara faced Drexar directly, her claws clashing against his blade in a brutal duel. Despite his size and strength, she matched him blow for blow, fueled by anger and resolve. When the opportunity arose, she struck true, disarming him and pinning him to the ground. It's over, she declared, her voice ringing with authority. Your rebellion ends here. With their leader captured and the command center destroyed, the Krylos resistance crumbled. The remaining forces retreated, leaving the stronghold in ruins. As the dust settled, Elias approached Zanara, placing a hand on her shoulder. You did it, he said simply. She looked at him, exhaustion mingling with triumph in her glowing eyes. We did it. Though the battle was won, both knew the war for peace was far from over. But standing side by side, they felt ready to face whatever came next, together. The victory over the Krylos stronghold was bittersweet. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, the damage they had inflicted on Earth lingered like a scar. Cities lay in ruins, millions were displaced, and tensions between humans and tyrants simmered dangerously close to boiling point. The fragile alliance Elias and Zanara had fought so hard to protect now teetered on the edge of collapse. Back on Earth, Zanara found herself at the center of a storm. News of her role in dismantling the Krylos leadership spread quickly, earning her both admiration and resentment. Some saw her as a hero, a bridge between two worlds, but others viewed her as a symbol of betrayal, a siren princess who had turned against her own kind. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, holding signs that read "No aliens on Earth" and "Protect humanity first." Elias did his best to shield her from the backlash, but it was impossible to ignore. Late one evening, as they walked through the quiet halls of the military base where they were staying, Zanara stopped abruptly and leaned against a wall, her head bowed. I'm tired of this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Every step I take feels like I'm being pulled in two directions. My people hate me for siding with you, and your people don't trust me no matter what I do." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm but gentle. "You're not alone in this, Zenara. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but giving up isn't an option, not when there's still hope." She looked up at him, her glowing green eyes filled with determination despite her weariness. "Hope won't rebuild those cities or bring back the lives lost. If we want to fix this, we need more than words. We need action." Together, Elias and Zenara devised a bold plan. Using her knowledge of Siren politics and his diplomatic skills, they decided to expose the corruption within the Krylos faction, and by extension, the flaws in the Siren caste system itself. They would rally support for reform, showing both humans and Tyrans that change was possible if they worked together. Their first move was to broadcast a message directly to the Tyran Empire. With the help of Earth's communications network, Zenara addressed her people publicly for the first time. Standing before a camera, clad in simple robes rather than ceremonial armor, she spoke with a sincerity that resonated deeply. "My name is Princess Zenara, daughter of King Vorac," she began, her voice steady and commanding. "For too long, our society has been ruled by fear and tradition. Traditions that divide us and hold us back. The Krylos sought to overthrow my father because they believed violence was the answer, but their actions only proved how broken our system truly is." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "I have seen another way, a world where strength lies not in domination, but in unity. Humans may be different from us, but they share the same dreams: peace, prosperity, and freedom. It is time we stop seeing them as enemies and start seeing them as allies." The transmission ended with a call to action, urging Tyrans to question the rigid hierarchy that governed their lives and consider a future built on cooperation rather than conquest. When the broadcast concluded, silence fell across the viewing room. Even director Lyanna Hart, who rarely showed emotion, seemed taken aback. "That was unexpected," she said finally. "Do you think it will work?" "It has to," Elias replied firmly. "If nothing else, it plants a seed. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with someone willing to challenge the status quo." Meanwhile, Zenara faced resistance closer to home. News of her speech reached King Vorac, who summoned her via holographic communication. His expression was unreadable as he stared at his rebellious daughter. "You've shamed our family yet again," he growled, his deep voice laced with anger. "Your defiance has brought dishonor upon the throne." "Honor means nothing if it comes at the cost of progress," Zenara shot back, standing tall despite the weight of his disapproval. "I didn't do this to shame you, father. I did it because our people deserve better. The Krylos exploited our weaknesses, and unless we confront those weaknesses, history will repeat itself." Vorthak's gaze softened ever so slightly, though his tone remained stern. "You always were too stubborn for your own good. But perhaps you are right. Perhaps it is time for change." It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was a start. For the first time, Zenara allowed herself to believe that reconciliation might be possible, not just between her and her father, but between their species as well. As weeks turned into months, the seeds of change began to sprout. Activists inspired by Zenara's message formed grassroots movements on both Earth and Siren, advocating for equality and collaboration. Governments cautiously reopened dialogue, wary but hopeful. And amidst it all, Elias and Zenara grew closer, their bond transforming into something deeper. One evening, as they stood atop a hill overlooking a rebuilt section of New Chicago, Elias turned to her with a smile. "You know, for someone who hates being treated like property, you sure have become quite the unifier." Zenara chuckled, nudging him playfully. "Don't get used to it, human. I'm still a troublemaker at heart. And I wouldn't have it any other way," he replied, his tone warm. In that moment, surrounded by stars and possibility, they realized they weren't just fighting for survival. They were forging a new path, one that bridged worlds and redefined what it meant to belong. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side, united by a shared vision of a brighter future. Years passed, and the scars of war began to heal. Earth's cities were rebuilt stronger than before, their skylines adorned with symbols of unity, monuments celebrating collaboration between humans and Sirens. Meanwhile, whispers of reform echoed across the Siren Empire, challenging centuries-old traditions and paving the way for a more inclusive society. At the heart of this transformation stood Elias Drake and Zinara Vorthak, two unlikely leaders who had defied expectations and rewritten the rules of what was possible. Their partnership became a beacon of hope, not just for their respective peoples, but for the entire galaxy. Together, they founded the Intergalactic Coalition for Unity, ICU, an organization dedicated to fostering cooperation among species and addressing conflicts before they escalated into violence. It wasn't easy. Resistance came from all sides, whether from human extremists or traditionalist tyrants unwilling to let go of the past. But Elias and Zinara faced every challenge head-on, their unwavering determination inspiring others to join their cause. One crisp morning, Elias found himself standing on a stage overlooking a massive crowd gathered in New Chicago's Central Plaza. The occasion was the unveiling of the Unity Monument, a towering sculpture depicting intertwined figures representing humanity and the Sirens, crafted by artists from both worlds. Beside him stood Zinara, her silvery hair catching the sunlight as she addressed the audience with quiet confidence. "Today marks not just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of another," she said, her voice carrying over the sea of faces below. "We have learned that fear and mistrust only divide us, while courage and understanding bring us closer together. This monument is not just a symbol, it is a promise to keep striving, to keep listening, and to never give up on the dream of peace." The crowd erupted into applause, cheers mingling with tears as people embraced the message of hope. Elias watched Zinara with pride, marveling at how far she had come since their tumultuous first meeting. She was no longer the defiant princess sent away as a gift. She was a leader, a visionary, and someone he deeply admired. After the ceremony, they retreated to a quieter part of the city, seeking refuge from the chaos. Sitting side by side on a park bench, they gazed out at the horizon where skyscrapers met the sky. "I can't believe we actually pulled it off," Elias mused, leaning back with a contented sigh. "A few years ago, I thought I'd be lucky to survive my next mission. Now, look at us." Zinara smiled faintly, her glowing green eyes reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. "It wasn't just us, you know. We had help from friends, allies, even strangers who believed in something better. Change doesn't happen because of one person or one moment. It happens when everyone works toward the same goal." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "Still, none of this would have been possible without you. You took a stand when no one else dared to. And you didn't back down, even when it felt like the whole universe was against you. And you didn't leave my side," she countered softly. "You reminded me that I wasn't alone, even when I doubted myself. That meant everything." For a moment, they simply sat in silence, savoring the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. But behind the tranquility lay a shared understanding. Their work was far from over. While Earth and Siron had taken significant steps forward, countless other worlds still grappled with division, inequality, and conflict. The ICU's mission was just beginning. Back on Siron, King Vorac observed the events unfold from his palace. Though he had initially dismissed his daughter's rebellion as reckless defiance, he now saw it for what it truly was, a catalyst for progress. The reforms sweeping through the empire were slow and often met with resistance, but they were undeniable signs of growth. Even the most stubborn traditionalists couldn't ignore the benefits of cooperation. Not when trade routes flourished, resources were shared equitably, and tensions eased along once hostile borders. As he stood on his balcony, gazing at the crimson desert stretching endlessly before him, Vorthek allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He thought about Zenara, the daughter he had tried to control, only to watch her rise above his expectations and become a force for change. Pride swelled within him, tempered by regret for the years wasted in misunderstanding. She has grown into a remarkable leader, a familiar voice remarked from behind him. Turning, Vorthak saw Queen Seren, his wife, and Zenara's mother, approaching with a soft smile. Perhaps it's time we acknowledge that. Vorthek sighed heavily, his clawed hands gripping the railing. I should have listened to her sooner. Instead, I pushed her away. It's not too late to mend those bridges, Seren replied gently. She may carry our blood, but she walks her own path now. All we can do is support her and trust that she knows what she's doing. Vorthak nodded slowly, resolve hardening in his gaze. Then perhaps it's time I did more than observe. Perhaps it's time I joined her. Months later, Elias and Zenara received an unexpected visitor aboard the Starblade, King Vorac himself. Dressed in simple robes instead of ceremonial armor, he looked smaller somehow, less imposing, yet infinitely wiser. His arrival marked a turning point, signaling that even the staunchest defenders of tradition could embrace change. I owe you an apology, Vorthak said, addressing his daughter directly. And gratitude, for showing me a new way forward. Zenara hesitated, then extended a hand. We're building a future worth fighting for, Father. Will you stand with us? Without hesitation, Vorthak clasped her hand in his. Always. As the stars stretched endlessly beyond their windows, Elias and Zenara looked toward the horizon, not just of space, but of possibility. They knew challenges lay ahead, but they also knew they weren't facing them alone. With allies old and new, they continued their journey, forging connections and breaking barriers wherever they went. In the end, their legacy wasn't written in treaties or monuments. It was etched in the hearts of those who dared to dream of a better world. And as long as there were stars to guide them, Elias and Zenara knew their story was far from finished.